this, Dutch? You never were that smart.
This podcast will make you a goddamn sexual tyrannosaurus. Welcome to Predator Minute, the podcast that breaks down the 1987 action sci-fi classic Predator 1 minute at a time. Today we'll be discussing minute 11, but before we do, we have a new guest to introduce. Our guest today is Scott Fogle. Scott, say hi.
Hello. Thank you for having me join your podcast.
Anytime. So once again, we are short my natural co-host, Aaron, my brother. He's out in Zimbabwe doing doctor stuff. So he is unfortunately just out of commission here and there over the weekends, which is when we record. So unfortunately, missing out on my co-host. But fortunately, there are a lot of people out there who I know and who are in my own family and my circle of friends who want to talk Predator. So I am #blessed to talk about #Predator.
And I'm #blessed to be invited, so thanks again.
You're welcome. Anytime. Like I said, #anytime. We'll be discussing minute 11 in a moment, but before we do, Scott, do you want to share any favorite Predator memories or the first time you saw Predator?
Yeah, actually, it's been interesting. The experience of listening to several of your previous minutes got me thinking about a lot of things, and it's nice that I'm in the same exact age group as you. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of running down after I wake up on Saturday, making some cereal, and finding a good Schwarzenegger flick. And I spent a lot of mornings doing that, so this was right in my sweet spot in terms of the presence of Arnold and all the other stuff you talked about in previous minutes. But Predator, in and of itself, really does stand out for me. It's always been one of my favorites, and it's something that I've been able to watch over and over repeatedly, and it doesn't get old. And I think that has a lot to do with some of the stuff you and Aaron talked about regarding the concise nature of it and really put together and everything having a purpose. Not to mention all the Arnold one-liners and the larger-than-life cast. I've really started watching the movie a little differently since listening to your podcast and looking for a lot more stuff. But
awesome.
My favorite stuff is the one-liners, the realization of the hunter, the flip in the scenario for these guys who are like the uber hunters that are out there that all of a sudden are becoming the hunted. It's just a great flick. I love it.
Yeah. No, wow. That was an awesome recap of what we've been doing, but also what we have to look ahead. I tend to start to watch one of the minutes for research, and then I just say to myself, well, I'm just going to watch like a couple more minutes, just like give it context. I need to watch a couple more minutes, and then I'm like fully engrossed in the movie again. Like, I've fallen in the movie trap. I'm watching the whole thing again. And that's happened more than one time, which is a testament to why Aaron and I chose to talk about this movie and why it has so many fans, in my opinion.
Oh, I just wanted to say one thing that has still surprisingly stood out is really paying attention to Alan Silvestri and the whole musical score soundtrack piece of it. I didn't realize how much intertwined, how much tendrils are connected between so many of these movies from the 80s and 90s. Mm-hmm. And now I hear it in just the way you hear the noises and you're like, hey, that sounds just like Lethal Weapon, or that sounds just like X, Y, or Z. And it's really amazing how small a world that really is.
Yeah, totally. For me, when I hear the soundtracks, especially in any kind of chase scenes in this movie, I totally am thinking about Back to the Future, because he did that just a few years prior, and that's, up to this point probably his most well-known work. But yeah, like you hear all sorts of, I don't even know what you call them, just the like the little chase scenes, like when you hit the high-pitched notes, and I'm thinking, oh, it's like Back to the Future chase scenes, or like you're saying, other action movies are going to have those little musical cues. And yeah, we'll talk a little bit about the music in this minute, because we do start to hear again some pieces of his score.
Absolutely, and it's super impactful.
But this is minute 11. Minute 11 opens with Dylan's point of view looking down into the jungle and ends with Dutch's squad silently starting a jungle hike. And since you're the guest, Scott, I would open it up to you and ask, what do you want to talk about first?
With regard to this minute, it's pretty straightforward, but there's a lot of nuance, as everything else you guys have discussed, that really kind of set the tone for these guys are dropping into a world that is no longer on their terms. You really get the sense, like, even when the helicopter's flying over, you see the top of the jungle trees and then like a dark, ambiguous under canopy, which they don't know what they're really getting into.
Ooh.
And I'll wait to talk about the music, but I really think that sets the stage for what they're getting into.
Sweet. Yeah, it's like entering another world, essentially. Just going from the whatever lives they're coming from to meet again as a squad to diving into this new world, this unknown.
Well, and you get to see they are down to business. Like, it's go time.
What's nice about this minute is the lines of dialogue are right up front, so it gives us a little natural divide where we'll talk about the lines and then we'll talk about the action. So McTiernan did this scene well, as he's doing every scene throughout this movie, in my opinion, really well, where he gives us some lines of dialogue, short, snappy, and then drops us into the action. And today's lines of dialogue have Dylan looking out the window saying, "Never knew how much I miss this, Dutch," and Dutch looking back at him just quietly saying, and with a big grin on his, not a grin, maybe a smirk, maybe a little bit of just like this condescending look, saying, "You never were that smart." And there's a lot of things you could read into that. One thing I took away from this exchange was Dutch saying, like, "You don't really know what you're actually going to get yourself into here. You don't know what we're dropping into. So yeah, you might say you missed this, but this isn't what you remember, or you're you're watching this with, like, you know, Dylan, and you're not taking this seriously enough, or nearly seriously enough."
Yeah, I get the impression that, first of all, that grin and that look, like you said, there's a lot of subtle nuance to that, which speaks to the evolution of Arnold's acting abilities, which I really like. But I think one of the messages you get there is that Dylan doesn't necessarily see the whole big long-term picture. He's just dealing with what's in front of him in an opportunistic way. And I think Dutch is kind of going, "Hey, well, now you're coming into this and you didn't think it all the way through, but there's no turning back."
Right.
I also like the fact that you can tell when Dylan says, "I never knew how much I missed this, Dutch." There really is a lot of apprehension all of a sudden. Like, the reality of the moment is hitting him.
Right. Like, you're not seeing, like you were saying, you're not seeing the long of this.
Yeah, his lack of being in the field has made him very focused on the short-term, opportunistic, what's right in front of him, and not thinking out the entire campaign.
During the exchange between Dutch and Dylan, you can still see the lights behind Dutch, the solid red along with a flashing yellow to the left of the red. And then as soon as he says, "You never were that smart," it just buzzes and the green light flashes on, like this kind of buzz. But I like being able to look really deeply into this stuff, because to me, that's almost like a game show buzzer saying, like, "You're right." Or actually, I guess the buzz in a game show would be like, "You're wrong." So maybe, oh my gosh, if it's like a "you're wrong" kind of buzz, that's to mean that Dylan is like thinking about other things. He's already thinking ahead of the game, right? Like when they're going to raid the guerrilla village, like what they're actually after and what the whole cabinet minister situation really is. And that Dutch is the one who's going to be looking silly at the end. So a little deep dive. So the red to the yellow to the green. It's the first time watching this, or when I was watching this minute for the first time isolated, that's when I was noticing, oh, it's like a red light telling you to go. It's like, it's go time. It's time to open the doors and start rappelling, and start emptying the chopper. But did you have anything to say about the lighting?
Well, not just the actual colors of the lights themselves, but much like the rest of the opening part of this movie, the use of the lighting to create whatever necessary mood the director's trying to do. And you see, you know, the rest of the whole chopper ride is in this like washed out red light, and everything changes. Right. The yellow all of a sudden, you know, brings natural skin color a little bit more to life, and then the green light, you only see it for a split second, and then boom, you're outside the chopper from a camera point of view. So I'm curious to know what that might be entailing, and whether that has any coupling to reality for what military lighting in a chopper is like.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's a whole lot of lights going on there. So I don't know if that's necessarily 100% accurate to say, right, while you're en route, everything's red, that easy to maintain night vision color, and then you have the flashing yellow. I would think the flashing yellow would not be good for keeping your night vision, because it's, you know, bright, it's closer to daylight, the sunlight. And the green, again, don't even know. I would think the green would be closer to the red in terms of like taking it easier on the eyes, but it is a bright green, and like you're saying, it's more bringing out the natural color, which is appropriate because they're about to jump into a whole bunch of natural green with the jungle. Anything else from that exchange? Should we move on?
No, I mean, I just like, it's one more one-liner, right? You almost get get numb to it after a while. In fact, for me, one-liners from other people stand out more in this movie than from Arnold, just because you get so many Arnold one-liners. But his delivery again of the "you never were that smart," and he makes it like very clearly stand out. That's a, him on a pedestal for a moment in the movie. That one didn't stick with me. It's not something I quote, but again, Arnold, natural one-liner delivery.
Great timing with everything. I mean, you have like the sound effects are added, I'm sure, later, but you had the visual of the light flashing behind him, and it's just dings on right after he says it. I think that's some wonderful timing. It's that uncanny timing that Arnold's characters seem to have.
Yep.
Dutch lets Hawkins know that he's up. Soon after that, the lines go out of the chopper, and the squad starts rappelling out of the chopper. And I was looking up some information about rappelling out of choppers before we talk about the actual squad going down. I was looking up and wondering, like, is this actually called rappelling? Is this something else? Like, when you really deep dive into things, like, is it called anything else? But this is rappelling. It's just different than, say, rappelling down a wall in the sense that there's no wall to push off of, and the helicopter rotor wash is severely pushing rappellers downward. So you have a lot more braking you have to do with your hand as you're rappelling. You're also going to be descending a lot more quickly. And I think you see that with the first descender, the first rappeller, who's supposed to be Hawkins, but at, I believe it's about second 23, you see the first repeller going out incorrectly, like going out basically butt first, when you're supposed to really kind of almost do this toothpick dive away and out.
And you kind of you go out and you swoop down, sort of.
Yeah, you go out, you swoop down with your feet basically pointed, maybe 30 degrees away from the ground, not like keeping your feet up against the chopper as you lower yourself. That would be more like what a wall rappel will look like, where you're keeping your butt out and down as opposed to your feet.
Agreed. And if you're doing a wall rappel with your feet off of the landing gear of a chopper and your feet come off, your face is going to go into the landing gear. So I tend to agree with you.
I watched a lot of like military training videos. You had, you could see the veterans of this exercise doing it, and they're just popping right out just naturally and diving right down and breaking themselves like way far down from the chopper than I would feel more comfortable breaking, because if you break too far down, you have all that force that's going to be brought on your brake hand. Yeah. But at the same time, they seem to know what they're doing. I would argue the first person, Hawkins, and maybe, I don't know if that's intentional or not, he's definitely like the rookie of the squad, the baby of the squad, going out butt first, and his feet just go skyward, you see, for a couple seconds before he corrects himself, and then everybody else rappelling out is doing it more correctly or just doing it more steadily.
It's funny, you clearly did the research to really go, is this the way this would really work? I think to a certain extent there's a desire to make it look like these guys are quick and know what they're doing, but I've actually done a fair amount of rappelling in my past, and the big thing they're skipping over is that was a 3 or 4 second transition when they go from sitting in a chopper to starting to hook up. No way. They would have all been hooked up well before they got there. The logistics of that is a lot more work than they make it look like here. And it's funny, I didn't really realize until taking a look at some of your notes here that, he says Hawkins, you're up. I kind of assumed Poncho was the first one down, being the only Spanish speaker, but I like your take on it that no, let's send the rookie down just in case he's going to land right on someone with a gun. Plus, he's going to get cut first.
Right, exactly. I was wondering if there's anything to the order. I don't think there is, other than just like, I don't know, like the character you're not going to really remember from this movie. You go first. And then, when it comes to like the crew landing, I made quite a few notes. I guess I made like a paragraph worth of notes there. But you only see 4 of the 7 land. You see Poncho land first, then you see Blaine land next, followed by what appears to be Dylan. I'm going to argue right now that it's not Dylan, that it's a stuntman. And then you have Arnold landing afterwards. And of those 4, 3 of those have military experience. Arnold, Jesse Ventura, and Richard Chavez, which makes sense. Then Dylan, again, I think his stuntman had military experience, but I don't think in any way is that Dylan. They are coming down on separate lines. That's part of correct procedure. Rappelling out of a chopper, you don't rappel on the same lines. But if they were only reduced to a couple lines, they would have come down from the helicopter, what's known as fast roping, where it's essentially like you're just sliding down the rope and you're not hooked into the rope, which to me seems terrifying, but it's also a way to quickly empty a chopper. They want to quickly empty a chopper, and like you said, they totally cut right to the chase of, you're up, and then he's bailing out of the chopper, like there he goes.
Yeah, and there's no reason to draw that scene out either for the audience's perspective, but we both know like there would have been a ton of gear coming down those ropes too and all the other stuff, but I still think they do it in a nice crisp way. That the best part is, like you said, they go from chatting in a chopper to you're up to on the ground and deploying, ready to go.
Yeah, like we don't hear any chatter once they hit the jungle floor. We just see like you said, they're all business. I do want to give credit to a lot of the information I was finding about fast roping and rappelling came from a site called sleuthsayers.org. They're a website that dedicates themselves to making sure that people writing different genres of fiction, like military fiction, crime fiction, have their facts straight. And so there'll be, on occasion, some blog posts on there from quote unquote experts in the field saying, like, if this is how it's going to be shown in the book, make sure you have these details right. So I really enjoyed that. The one bugaboo for me watching this scene is like, I mean, and this is just purely technical looking at it as a deep dive. I totally know that, but it bothers me that the lines are just dangling, that they don't have like, it doesn't, right. It's not showing like what's anchoring them down, or like, did they throw some like heavy gear down attached to these ropes first to anchor it? Are they should be holding each other's lines technically, but that's all just, again, that's all by the wayside. This is all McTiernan just saying, hey, you know what? They're hopping out of a chopper. They're on the jungle floor. That's all that matters.
Well, and then the emphasis from McTiernan and cinematography standpoint is different, right? They set the mood. You can, again, I like the fact that they don't pick great lighting to see these choppers. It's actually kind of hard to see them when they're jumping out of the, when I first watched it, it was washed out lighting on my TV and I could barely see it. So I like that because it lets you, it's foreboding and all that stuff that comes with it.
They are entering this dark environment, this claustrophobic setting, right? Like as soon as they land, they're like running into trees, leaves. You see fog or mist around. And even when they're like kind of tapping each other, acknowledging each other, like, okay, we're all here. And Arnold's, silently tapping each other, making sure, giving hand signals, saying, go this way. They're checking each other's gear. It's all done quietly, but it's all like up close, and like the bodies are all really close to each other, which is continuing that idea of claustrophobia. Like if I'm watching this, I'm like up close with everything. And it's like, there's still no space, even though we just dropped into like a more open space. We are totally jam packed in here. And that maybe that claustrophobia is supposed to symbolize like safety or something like that, because once things really open up, that tends to be when things become a lot more dangerous for the crew.
Well, and it falls right into them being a professional group of soldiers. Like, we're going to start right on top of each other and immediately secure this immediate area and then start going out in our zones from there.
So a note I talked about with Zach last minute about this scene, about them dropping out of the chopper. This has to be a scene this has to be an action this crew has done many times before for many missions, but I'm sure it's one that like pumps up the adrenaline over and over again every time they do it. I was wondering, is there something like in your line of work or in your life that you do, appropriate for the podcast, that pumps up the adrenaline like every time it happens? For me as a teacher, I can tell you it's like anytime I'm teaching that first day of school, or I'm like teaching in front of parents for a parent night, even though like I've done it many times before, it always like pumps me up adrenaline wise. What about you?
Well, in my professional career, as boring as that may be, being in sales, for me, it's really a big, important inflection point meeting that there's been a ton of prep for, and I'm meeting with some exec, and I know I have to convince him of something, like, it's all on the line, and just I'm so amped up before it starts. And you're so worried about all the scenarios, you get so emotionally wrapped up, you can't sleep. And then as soon as I'm going, it's fine. It's all gone. Or I've presented in front of a few hundred people before, and that's the same thing. Like, the build up to that is just ridiculous. And then you let off some steam as soon as you start. You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean, Bennett.
But to be honest, the bigger, like, short, narrow, just spike adrenaline I've ever had is similar to what they're doing. Like, when I rappel, I'm not a huge fan of heights, and when I've rappelled off a platform, like, getting to the starting point is brutal, and then rappelling, you're all of a sudden viscerally involved, and you're not like adrenalized over the anticipation, or like jumping off a cliff into the water. Same sort of thing. Like, it's all about the build up, and then it's over. So, yeah, no, I totally get what you're saying.
I guess I have rappelled a couple times. I rappelled back in the Boy Scout days down a wall. And then when my wife Sarah and I took a group of students to Europe, one of the big selling points was, we're going to do all these cool things in all these different European countries, kids, and we're also going to rappel down a castle. And that was like one of the big selling points, probably one of like the first or the second big selling point for that trip that we're trying to sell students on to go during the summer. And Sarah and I also rappelled down that castle in Wales, I believe it was. And yeah, all the adrenaline was like waiting your turn, kind of making your way up the stairs
knowing it's
for
coming.
an hour, and then like you're hooked up to the harness, you're looking at the instructor. In this case, it was these very, very excitable New Zealanders. They were the ones who were running kind of this summer camp basically in Wales, and they're like, you can do it, here's what you do, and like they're it's a terrible New Zealand accent. I'll work on that. Anyway, so the whole thing was you just follow their instructions, and then even though I had the adrenaline going, that's the one thing I remember was like with my feet up on the parapet, hooked into the harness, just looking at the instructor and listening to their instructions, even though it was super stressful and super adrenalized. As soon as they said, what to do, you just did it like one step at a time, and I backed right off. And once I was descending, like you're saying, just like once you're presenting or teaching, once you're on that line, like us old pros, once you're on that line, it's just like, just naturally just descend at the rate that you've been instructed to do so.
Well, it may be a little nuanced, but I know every time I've dealt with that kind of adrenaline or anticipation or anxiety, usually my go-to is humor to diminish it. Obviously, they don't use it, so they all just have to kind of stew in their own crock pot of fear or whatever it is and then execute. But they're used to it. The point is, they probably, that water rolls off those ducks' backs, so to speak. I know last time I went rappelling, the guy that we were in Jamaica, and the guy that was about 3 in front of me was noticing some fray on the ropes and asked the guy, hey, how often do you change these? It wasn't bad, but his answer was, when it breaks, man. But it was a joke, right?
Everyone's yeah. There's one further line of dialogue you hear between the choppers, which in the audio sounds like eyes away, but when I did some research into rappelling procedures in the Forest Service rappelling guide says that they're saying lines away, and the whole thing they would be saying, the whole exchange would be lines are away, clear to depart. Then you'd have the response from the other pilot, lines away, clear to depart. Then the feedback is affirmative, lines are clear to depart.
So the choppers are checking each other out?
Yeah, so you have the spotter, the spotter chopper, the gunship basically, because if you're in the rappelling chopper, you're not going to be able to see how clear you are of obstacles, or if all your lines are not tangled with one another. But you have that spotter communicating, hey, you're all clear, and it sounds like they're going for, again, that kind of authenticity, which I enjoy. It's fun to be able to look up these little extra things. So they're in the jungle, they're tapping each other, they're doing their prep work now that they're on the jungle floor.
How much I love Alan Silvestri. Basically, as soon as you see the close-up camera angles of them descending into the jungle and landing on the ground, you just get this real subtle 3 or 4 seconds of wah, 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 like that sound that really just sets the stage for they've now entered something new. There's a inflection point, and I can't help but feel like, to me, the sound kind of denotes, only from the fact that I know what's going to happen, you've entered the game. Like, it feels like they are now in the predator's world and are combatants and therefore are prey. And that denotes that they, whether or not they're aware of it yet, they have entered the game.
It makes me think, do they have just like extra senses that kick in when they hit the floor here in the jungle, about like, are they aware that they're entering this dangerous ground? And I'm sure they are, with number of missions and probably the variety of missions they've taken on. They probably just automatically kick in that, that danger radar, and they are just extra sensitive to any kind of new noises or any kind of sights. But yeah, this is Alan Silvestri again. This is just a real quick snippet, like you're saying, just a few seconds of the track titled Jungle Trek. And we hear Jungle Trek over the next few minutes as they are making their way to the crash chopper. But yeah, you can find it on YouTube and listen to it some, and it's a nice foreboding sound, like you're saying. It's like you're pressing start in the video game, like, all right, I'm in stage 1 of Contra, or I'm entering the battle, or entering the danger zone.
You're entering the first stage of Contra, but you only have one life.
But you only have one life. Yeah.
No, but now that I pay attention to it, the potency of just a few notes, it's really does a great job of setting a tone, setting you up, getting you ready for whatever's going to happen.
And it's just like all their, and they've touched down, and they're checking each other's gear with the music on there. And then the music fades out by the end of the minute because, they're like on their way, and maybe like maybe that's to indicate also like maybe their adrenaline's like dying down, and it's like letting the muscle memory take over. Like, okay, there's nothing too, exciting after we've landed, like, and we know where we're going, then it's like we have our bearings and right, we have our direction. Maybe it's like business as usual, and that's not nearly as frantic or scary to them.
Yeah, no, and I just looking back at my notes, the other thing that I think the anticipation and the adrenaline we're talking before. One thing I took a note of is they're going into the middle of nowhere, into the middle of a silent jungle that is only going to have jungle sounds with these two incredibly loud choppers, right? And after the music fades out, you really kind of you hear the choppers again, the loud rotor sounds of the choppers as they depart. And from a military team like that, they got to be on point. Like anyone who's around knows they're there. So that I think is another big part of the anticipation and the music and all that.
That's a good point, because right, as low as those choppers might be, like they're making unmistakable sound. They're anybody around for miles is gonna recognize that sound of Huey's moving and then hovering, and the hovering, someone's going to probably cue into like, oh, there's like someone, maybe they're dropping something off.
Yeah, those aren't skeeters.
Right, those aren't skeeters. They're a lot more potent. One thing I noticed that I didn't make a note of, but I imagine these lines have to have some kind of tensile strength, so they have to have some kind of limit to how much they can carry. And you have these huge, burly guys, including Jesse Ventura, who's carrying a minigun and who's carrying probably at least 100 pounds of ammunition.
More than that.
So
yeah,
yeah, probably more than that. So old sold, if we're looking at, the wrestler being between like 250 and 300 pounds, and like the minigun itself in the burlap sack, like in his lap, basically being like another 100 pounds at least, and backpack 150 pounds. You're looking at, what is that, like 500 pounds just like coming down that line. Those are like some in the chopper scene right there before they start rappelling. You can see like just how thin those lines are. I don't know if that line is holding it or just the magic. It's just the magic strength of movie.
McTiernan didn't show it, but actually the second chopper was for Jesse.
Second chopper, yeah, had like the bay doors to open under it, like beep beep, just like it's dropping a big bomb.
They actually show the gunship and the minigun guarding the personnel chopper, but maybe Jesse was in there and just kind of detached the minigun and brought it down with him.
Right, yeah, because once he lands, yeah, you can like clearly see it's this duffel he's carrying in front of him, and you see it later when he's moving through the jungle.
I did take this note. I wanted to check with you. Are those the same two helicopters that are the original two that bring them in?
That's a good question. Well, there's only the one that brings them in initially to the beach in minute 1/minute 2 that they're hopping off of, because the Huey's meant to fit all of them. The Huey's meant to fit, I think, up to 15 people is what our researcher's telling us. So that is possibly supposed to be the same one. I wasn't really sure. That's a really good question, because if I zipped back to minute 1 and then look back here,
I think I was associating two choppers in minute 1 from Aaron talking about the two different types of choppers that are in this movie, and that got me thinking they were both in the scene. My bad.
Yeah, well, these are both Hueys, and then the different Huey the different chopper we saw was called a Jet Ranger, and that was on the beach. What Aaron and I were theorizing is that they're actually using that smaller chopper, the Jet Ranger, to capture the shots when you see both choppers on the screen. Then you're thinking, oh, they must be in another helicopter. And I don't know, because the one that they're rappelling out of does not have rocket pods, and the one they came in on alternated shots between it either had rocket pods or it did not have rocket pods. So it really could be. It'd be cool if there was like some designation on the tail to tell you like the ID of this chopper, but if there is, that is not clear enough.
Again, they don't need rocket pods. One big chaw spit from Jesse could take out another aircraft.
Sexual Tyrannosaurus. And a real quick pickup line here, or catch-up line, is that someone on Facebook was mentioning, like, because Jeff and I were theorizing about what sexual Tyrannosaurus can mean, and we didn't really dive into the details as much, but someone brought up on Facebook and messaged me saying that, well, sexual Tyrannosaurus is like this huge beast, right? It's like, it's unmistakable. That's what he means. He's like this huge hulking beast, sexually speaking. And then to me, as I was doing some thinking about it, I was thinking, well, like Tyrannosaurus is clearly like the predator of the dinosaurs, right? It's like out of all the dinosaurs, that's what people pinpoint as the predator. So I thought, maybe that's some accidental line reading, but at the same time, right, the whole movie's based around a hunter and its prey, or, the predator and its prey. So maybe it's just chalking up to more through lines of mention things that remind you of these creatures hunting each other.
Absolutely. Short arms, no foreplay.
I think the only note I have left over for this minute is Dylan had a little bit extra line in the script where after he said, you don't know how much I miss this, Dutch. He goes on to say, once you get this in your blood, you never get it out. And then Dutch even has like a short little 2-word, let's go, after he says, you never were all that smart. So there's not a lot added by the script, or there wasn't a lot of taken out of the script from when they filmed the movie, but it's just further proof that less is more. And usually it's John McTiernan in the commentary experience saying, let's cut that line, let's cut this line. And even Arnold himself, I guess, was a big advocate for having fewer lines where the actions can tell you more of the story if you're paying attention.
Well, and it's shorter and more concise, but also it's a different line. So you don't know how much I miss this, Dutch, versus what he says in the movie, never knew how much I miss this, Dutch. It's one is rhetoric, one is more Arnold doesn't know. It's subtle, but it matters, right? I think it's better the way it was executed, for sure.
Yeah, because the way it comes off in the script is like saying, hey, Dutch, you don't know how much I miss this, versus in the movie, it's him saying, like, the way he says, never knew how much I miss this. I assume he's saying, like, myself, like, I didn't realize how much, I look forward to this action, jumping out of a chopper into the jungle on a mission. But then, like you said, the choppers take off. So all that talk about, there's not being any backup, that's really punctuated here with the choppers leaving, and then the jungle sounds taking over, like our first all natural environment where we're not in the palapas, we're not in the huts on the beach, we're not in a chopper, we're not in jeeps, we're just on foot, and we're entering the jungle. Welcome to the jungle, baby. You're gonna die. Other notes? Anything else stand out to you in this minute, Scotty?
No, again, I just love the subtlety. When I actually got my own minute here to work on with you and focus on everything, I just notice more and more in the less that McTiernan uses in this movie, and it's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Sweet. Any thoughts about previous minutes, about, things you weren't around for, like the epic handshake, Long Tall Sally, the chopper ride with all the interactions? I
think I mentioned before, like, you get kind of numb to Arnold and all of his one-liners. So for me, the one-liners in this movie that really stand out the most come from Jesse. I really love his character, Blaine. I loved the epic handshake minute. Actually, a guy at the gym I go to, I started telling him about this podcast, and he was so excited. Oh. He ran and grabbed a chalk bucket, and he's like, let's do the handshake. So he's like, doing it with chalk, it made it so much better. And then
that's awesome.
I love the chopper ride, the whole sexual Tyrannosaurus, Jesse Ventura. And I'm really looking forward to hopefully being involved again if I can. It's a great movie, and I love dissecting it, and I love everything about it. So I really have enjoyed the podcast. It got me looking at things a lot differently, especially the early minutes, how you had to spend so much time talking about credits. It opened up a whole world of nuance and connections that I didn't really realize exist, and I really enjoyed that.
Awesome. Well, thanks for the positive feedback, bro. I appreciate that. Do you have a favorite scene or a favorite line? Let's just go with favorite line. Do you have a favorite line from the movie? Because there's so many lines in this movie.
Either Arnold calling the Predator an ugly son of a bitch, or Jesse and Poncho's interaction on I Ain't Got Time to Bleed.
I think he says, you're an ugly mother effer.
Yeah, he does. I was trying to keep it a little more.
Oh, we've been swearing where necessary for the podcast. Well, so if they swear in the movie, then I'll be saying
those are the lines. But my favorite piece of this movie is really just how they keep adding to the potency of the Predator in layers. Like when you realize, oh my God, he can see them no matter what. He can see heat. Like the movie keeps you out in front of the characters in terms of understanding what's happening and how big a trouble they're in with regard to the Predator. And I love that because it comes in little pieces throughout the whole first half of the movie. So it's great.
Where can people find you online, Scott?
Unfortunately, I think I'm a little bit of a hermit. You can find me watching DVDs of Arnold Schwarzenegger at home, but my online presence is pretty work-oriented. I don't put a lot of content out there, unfortunately. But if you do want to find me, you can just look up Scott Fogle, Fogle, on LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook, and see how boring I really am.
I like that. Hey, you can find me watching some Arnold movies on DVD at home.
I love the fact. I mean, like, All going through all of them, man. Running Man. I think you need to do a Running Man minute.
Oh, Running Man minute. That'd be fun. I'm a big Total Recall fan. I like that, and I like The Terminator a lot more than I like Terminator 2, and I love Last Action Hero. Another John McTiernan movie.
You actually, hearing you and your brother talk about Last Action Hero, put it on my list of I need to go back and rewatch that, because I really only saw it in the theaters and haven't seen it since.
Yeah, it's one of those 2-part movies where the first half, in my opinion, is just awesome, 100% self-aware action, and looking right at the camera, winking, full knowing what it's doing, and then it takes a dive down when Arnold enters the real world through the movie screen with the magic ticket. But it has its moments even in the second half that I feel.
I definitely don't think I would want to do a Kindergarten Cop minute or whatever the Batman is where he's Dr. Freeze.
Oh, yeah, Batman and Robin. The Ice Age.
That's right. But no, I really appreciate the opportunity to join this and would be happy to do so again.
Awesome. Yeah, we'd love to have you again. And hopefully Aaron can be co-host again soon so we can start wrangling our guests along with our 2 hosts. That would be great. Predator Minute is on Twitter at Predator Minute. We are on Facebook at Predator Minute Podcast. You can find the podcast on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, other podcatching apps and services. If you have been in a rappelling into the jungle scene out of a helicopter, let us know. Email us, predatorminute@gmail.com. And for Predator Minute, I've been Jon.
And this is Scott.
And until next time,
get to the chopper!
da 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 da.